Hearing and seeing none, we'll just continue on. As for my own remarks, I'd just say that given our late start, I'm eager to get underway with our work. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us, but given the collective wisdom of this group and its experience, I think that I would say I'm confident that if we keep the train on the tracks, we'll end up with a great outcome. Um, so, with that being said, there is the third item on the agenda, which is the announcement of co-chairs. And if there isn't anybody here from the Public Health Committee that would like to make that announcement, I'm happy to make that announcement on behalf of the leaders of the Public Health Committee that have made those chair appointments. Um, I don't think I see anybody on the participant list from the Public Health Committee. So I'll just go ahead and do the honors. Joining me as co-chairs of this august group will be John Kiskowski and Sonia Brinkworth. I hope I'm saying her last name right. John, Sonia, if you have any comments that you'd like to make at this time, the floor is yours.
No comment for myself, John.
Okay. Well, I'll speak twice as long. Thank you, Jim. So for folks I haven't met, I'm John Kiskowski. I'm a land use planner. I have a private consulting practice, and my practice has us serving the neighborhood of 25 to 30 towns in Connecticut, most of which are rural. And so I've been dealing with septic development considerations for 25 years. That said, I bring to this committee the great Socratic understanding that I know nothing. So I will approach this with humility, and I'm eager to learn and help out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Um, like John, I also know nothing, and relying on the expertise and the collective wisdom of this group to carry us forward. Um, I thought it would be prudent at this time, as we move on the agenda item to number 4, which is a discussion regarding the working group's mission, goals, and expected outcomes, that it be prudent to just go over Section 49 of Public Act 25-97. I just want to read the first paragraph verbatim. And Section 49 states there is established a working group to assess and provide recommendations regarding the regulatory requirements concerning sewage disposal, including but not limited to nitrogen discharge limits and their impact on the development of housing, public health, and the environment. It goes on to state that the working group also is tasked with balancing the costs associated with development of housing and a risk-based approach to protecting public health and the environment. So with that being said, this group in Section 49 goes on to state that it's the expectation of this working group that its report, when it concludes its work, is to be submitted to the Department of Public Health and the Committees on Public Health, Environment, and Housing. And that report is due February 1st, 2026. So I have thoughts about, certainly the mission, the goals, and the expected outcomes of this august group. But I thought it would be best if I open it up to the group at this point, and hear from you as to what you would like to see this group focus on. Certainly, if you look at the mandate before us, we are to review, the nitrogen limits, and we're specifically mandated to do that. And we are, beyond that, kind of given a lot of leeway to, review sewage disposal policies and regulations in the state of Connecticut and how to um, you know identify any efficiencies or improvements that may take into account the cost of housing. So with that being said, I'd like to open it up to both first to John and to Sonia, and then to the group at large. And I will also circle back with some comments after the conversation appears to have concluded. John, Sonia?
No, I have nothing to add to that, Jim. The understanding of the nitrogen limits is something that I would think is a great place to start and just get a baseline understanding. Sonia.
So are we going to be talking about what subgroups will be created? Is that what the intent is right now? Or
Yeah,
just
I
topics
would
going
think, yeah, as well. We're on number four, right? Did I speed past number four? If not, we're really talking about the mission and the goals and expected outcomes, and then number five really is how do we execute that? So,
So
so
one of my topics of concern is training for the sanitarians to make sure that we can handle these types of systems and these larger amounts of flow, as well as I have written before, climate change and how it may impact the direct shoreline on when we have facing with sea level rise.
hmm, thank you. I see Rob's our first rank and file member that would like to say a few words. Rob, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. I'm wondering if, a subdivision, how subcommittees or subgroups are divided out. I would suspect would be driven by what we may, as a collective group, decide what our priorities are. And so I wonder if maybe that's the first place we should look at, because in my mind, there are a number of questions about what the priorities are. Certainly, the specifically the nitrogen assessment is detailed in the Public Act, but the language that recommendations regarding regulatory requirements concerning sewage disposal, that's a very broad area. And there are lots of regulations governing sewage disposal in the state of Connecticut. For example, certainly there are the proposed regulations that are being in large part driven by the increase in gallons per day discharge for on-site, and also the fact that the proposed regulations call for details on small size community septic systems. But in addition to that, my recollection, and maybe this group can correct me if I'm wrong, there are other potential regulations coming down the pipe for residential AT systems. I'm not sure if we want to go there or not, but certainly I think that someone could argue that that falls within the broader language identified in this Public Act. So I think we really need to define the scope of what we're looking at here as a group. And then once we define that scope, what priorities, and then at that point, figure out what kind of subgroups we want to split up to address those priorities. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Rob. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. Obviously, the challenge here is that this group has gotten a late start, and that our report needs to be published by February 1st. So I do think that while the scope in the language appears to be incredibly broad, that we are going to be limited by the amount of time that we have to execute our work. With that being said, we'd love to kind of really open this conversation up and get some general thoughts from everybody here today. So please feel free to to raise your hand or to just unmute your mic, and if you could just announce your name prior to providing your thoughts, that would be great. I see David Potts.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Dave.
We're, so I guess, my thought on it is that the Department of Health in general, just going back, they came up with a proposal how to handle these larger sites. That proposal largely mimicked the DEP approach. It had some differences to it. And I guess ultimately there was feedback that said we should really talk about that as a group, I think. I mean, that's how this whole broad mission started, isn't it? So, really the question becomes, uh, what are the options for looking at nitrogen in the state? They range from doing nothing to doing something everywhere. And there's many states out there. I happen to work not everywhere in the country, but around the country. So you get to see different approaches to it. I would say Massachusetts is probably the most advanced. They look at it from a watershed perspective. And you can have a house on one side of the street deemed to require nitrogen removal and a house on the other side of the street not deemed to require it. So I mean it's a broad I guess analysis of how do we want, what are options and how do we want to do it with respect to the nitrogen, and I think the AT component falls in under that after we decide what the trade-offs are on cost for housing and the benefits for every dollar spent on nitrogen that they actually remove nitrogen. So I think from the nitrogen side, that's how I see it. We got to, dive into that and figure out is the proposal that Matt put out there in itself good and we're all happy with that, or are there tweaks to that that might benefit the environment further and potentially save costs? And then, from the balance I see there, there's a host of things that we might do to the public health code to help with housing costs and probably not change the effects on the environment or health. So I guess, is that how we're going to divide up into the committees, have a nitrogen committee and then have the different idea committee, and then I guess how it should be, I'll say, managed or governed going forward, if the code advisory committee is the appropriate mechanism or something else.
So David, if you don't mind, if I chime in here, I would just suggest from a process perspective, obviously, that is number 5 on the agenda, but just generally speaking, it's my thought that we will convene a subcommittee dedicated to the nitrogen question. That committee will then, put some parameters around what it thinks the work of that committee should look like, and that committee would then report up to the larger group for a consensus, if you will, and then it would proceed accordingly. So I do think, and John and Sonia and I, John and Sonia having just been announced as fellow co-chairs, will probably circle back after this meeting and have a conversation pertaining to process for this working group. But if they agree, I really do think that the question needs to be answered by the nitrogen committee about what it thinks its scope should be. And then it should deliver that message to the larger group. The larger group will either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and then the committee can then continue on with its work. John, Sonia, do you agree with that initial assessment?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Dave, do you have anything else to add?
That's it.
All right. I
Thank
think
you.
the next individual with his hand up was Matt Gilchrist.
Thanks. Matt Gilchrist, EG Home and Connecticut Home Builders, multiple organizations there. So I'm always going to look at this and our progress through the eyes of one, affordability and attainability of housing. How do we get more homes built in Connecticut? And how do we do it in a manner that allows builders and developers to be able to properly plan for the costs that are going to be associated with a project? When you evaluate a project, you have to make a lot of assumptions and really choose your path, before you even offer the seller money. And then you go from there. And what happens a lot in septic situations is the game changes quite drastically along the way as multiple people have their hands in the process. So one of the things that I'm going to be pushing for is really like a stabilization of how do we manage the system, how do we manage the process. And I'll be looking really towards the building code as a good example. We have a state building code. The town of Ridgefield cannot change the building code. They cannot make it more stringent. They cannot, have their own building code. While Connecticut does have one of the most stringent and advanced building codes, as a developer, I can look at it and say, okay, I know the rules. I know what the building code is, and I know that, in the near future, it's going to be this because the next one's coming down the pipeline. So I can plan from a cost perspective. So I'm really going to be pushing for that same type of rules. Like, I don't want to get into a town where all of a sudden the town health district and the sanitarium that's in that town gets to make their whole own set of rules. And I know it's not supposed to happen that way, but it does happen that way. So we really need to make sure that we give developers and home builders the opportunity to be successful from the beginning by just knowing the rules. I'm a layman as far as the science goes. I'm going to rely on the experts on the science. But from what I can tell, like most of the science work has been done for us. It's clearly put out there by acreage and by, what the earth can absorb. So now we just have to make our rules on how we're going to live with that science. So, I'll always be asking that question. How does this affect our ability to provide more housing here in the state of Connecticut? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I think the next individual with their hand up, it looks like Audra.
Thanks very much. Audra Dixon, Connecticut Deep. So I just wanted to get just some clarification about mission goals and expected outcomes. It is part of this process, and I understand we have a deadline in February, is to include recommendations potentially about municipal regionalization and potential funding opportunities for that growth, for long-term growth.
So I think that's a great question. And, I can say from my own perspective that, and I'll just say here that I think there are really three buckets from us to kind of, derive our work from. One of them obviously is a direct, which is mandated by the statute, is to review nitrogen limits. Obviously, beyond that, the statute is pretty broad in what it is conveying, and I think that there is an opportunity to address, all septic regulation and weigh its impacts on housing production.
Okay.
I also think that process, to your point, Audra, is an important one, right? Where can we gain efficiencies and/or identify ways to build housing and in a affordable way to increase production? And how do we maybe even bake that into the process itself? So yeah, to your point, that may mean talking about additional funding where we think that funding is needed. Obviously, there are budgetary constraints at the state level that our recommendations would be contending with. But nonetheless, I think it would be prudent and or appropriate for us to at least consider where there may or may not be bottlenecks that could be addressed by proper funding and programmatic changes. Excuse me, programmatic changes.
Okay, no, that's helpful because I've heard people mention AT, and that is definitely a pathway, right, for some systems, and there are definitely models that exist nationwide. What I would ask, and we think about funding and long-term maintenance is, septic has to get, even AT systems, they have to get pumped out. There is a huge cost associated with that, and then it comes back to the municipality anyway. And a lot of municipalities cannot handle large loads of septage. And some of them don't want it. They are considered slug loads and they will wipe out a system. So again, I'm just thinking a lot of it is regionalization, similar with stormwater. It's, where is this better managed for long-term impacts so that you can build more if you have that infrastructure in place.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Sonia, I see that you still have your hand up. Is that from earlier or?
No, I actually would like to state some, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm looking at is the regulatory framework of what is 1913B103, right? So I'm up in those regs daily. That is very important to us right now. So I'm thinking the framework is what's going to guide for further AT, making sure that we were able to have something that we could change on a yearly or bi-yearly basis, however it is that is done in the building code a certain way. We have the technical standards process. I see that a lot of the technical stuff may come later on and need to be changed as we go throughout the years as septic systems and technology changes. So I was just wanted to make sure that we are going to look at that framework to make sure that we can get that kind of assessing our information and compiling it and changing the regs, or not the regs, that standards or whatever they're going to be called, continuously.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and one other thing, I'm so sorry. So the reason I'm very stressed with the shoreline, we are, quite a few of our towns are under orders for nitrogen loading into the sound. So a lot of the towns do have different ordinances that are more stringent. So I understand where Matt's coming from. It would be great if we could be more standard, even on the shoreline, but keeping it in mind that we are under orders, which may be a little more difficult with the nitrogen or different way of handling the nitrogen than further inland.
Great. Is there, oh, I see a couple more hands popping up. Jim, please feel free. Jim, you're muted if you'd like to say something. There you go.
I was practicing my speech. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jim Carenberg from the Chatham Health District, and that's what's underneath my face right now. A couple things. I thought mission would be like our this group's mission statement would be, what is our mission statement? Like, i.e., that we are going to work as a cohesive group to obtain the requirements as outlined in the Public Act. Wasn't diving into that. The mission is to, look at the nitrogen and the public health code and technical standards. But that was my focus when you're talking about mission. Maybe we should first start off with establishing a statement, a mission statement for this group, so we at least have a foundation, and then we can build off of that. We cannot forget about, and maybe Matt can address this if he wishes, but there's more than 1913 B103 and the technical standards. There's also the design manuals. The design manual 1 and 2 has been updated since July 1998. There's some great information in there that we should also be looking, not forgetting, and we should using that as a reference also. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Dennis?
Hello, everyone. Dennis Hallahan here with Infiltrator, and I'm an engineer. And I guess I would just reiterate a bunch of statements that already said is, what was just mentioned was, our mission statement. Okay, being an engineer, I want to know the mission statement. I want to know our goals. I know our end goal is February 1st, which is coming fast. You're very correct. But let's define each one of those goals. Because I think right now we're lacking in that direction. Once we have a goal defined, okay, then let's get 3 volunteers for goal number 1 and 4, and set up those committees and so forth. So I think just we need to just define our mission statement and our goals, and then move forward from there.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. So yeah, I don't disagree with anything said by Dennis and Jim. A mission statement makes a lot of sense, and it's one upon which we can thereby build our goals and kind of derive our outcomes from that. The question is how do we do that? Do we want to try to tackle that today? Would folks like to provide recommendations offline? We have each other's emails and communications, and ways to communicate with each other, excuse me. And then would it make sense for, say, John and Sonia and I to, kind of synthesize the recommendations that were provided to us, and then provide, that information at the next meeting for us to consider and vote on if necessary?
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point.
Okay. Great. Looks like we got a couple of thumbs up there as well. So I don't see any other hands up pertaining to this portion of the agenda. So, I mean, we've obviously kind of tackled 4 and 6 here. I think that maybe we've heard from folks about, goals, and certainly I think we can take what we've heard here today and come up with some possible concepts for a mission statement. And if folks are okay with it, obviously we just assigned the co-chairs officially today. And so I think it would make a lot of sense for in the interim for John and Sonia and I to get together, maybe discuss the process for this working group moving forward, or what we think the process should be, and then maybe provide an outline and potential workflow for the working groups. And then again, I know that we haven't assigned the working groups yet, but maybe given the conversations that we heard today, John, Sonia, and I can kind of provide some skeleton concepts that we can kind of put meat on the bones at our next meeting, if folks think that makes sense. I am going to take silence as tacit compliance. With that being said, obviously this is a shorter meeting. I don't expect meetings to be this short moving forward. I think that folks can expect some communication from us between now and the next meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks from today, and will also be at 2 o'clock. So I expect that we'll be hearing from Trent and Beverly with any additional communications that may be necessary to facilitate this group's work. But beyond that, if there is no additional comments or concerns, John and Sonia, if you don't have anything additional to add, I would say that we can move for an adjournment.
So moved.
There you go. All right. So let's adjourn, and we'll be meeting again 2 weeks from today. John and Sonia, I'll be reaching out shortly, and we can get together in the interim to have a conversation.
Thank you, Jim.